Okay, no one really talks about this, at least not that I've seen. People are still using GTO Wizard, like standard solver outputs, and barely understanding how they work, or if they do understand how they work, they're capping themselves because they're exposing themselves to a static model. Standard solver outputs, especially in like a library, like a GTO Wizard library, are some of the worst ways to actually study theory or to study poker in general to increase your edge. If you already know what to look for, like if you've had people cut through all of the solver noise and give you the actionable takeaways, the sort of thing that I've made like the benchmark of my coaching up till this point, you can see through the noise and kind of find the signal, but you need like a poker oracle to make sense of what this output means. Due to like a low accuracy of the solver and just being constrained to these like four sizes, what you get on the flop is just, oh, I guess everything can bet, but not that much, but a tiny bit. But even this thing's different. I meant to bet 33%, 4.8% of the time, 50%, 4.6. Oh, I meant to overbet this much, but three quarters this much. Oh, I guess I'll make it simple. I'll make it actions. Oh no, chart. So many buttons. When you pull up a GTO Wizard sim and you see these four sizes and you see that it's mixing everything, it's really hard to make sense of it. It's hard to brain solve this down into a practical, simple strategy because no one's mixing four sizes. Back in the day, you had to run your own sim from scratch. GTO Plus is pretty fast at that. There's things like Rocket Solver that are still available that do that really, really quickly. But you still have to set up your own sim. You still have to choose a simple bet size and then run it and have it tell you like how to average out that size because we have to simplify this to something more practical. Now with Ruse AI, acquired by GTO Wizard because it would have killed them otherwise, you can actually do that pretty much instantly. I'm not going to go into the details of how the algorithm works, but we'll just pull up the same board. And, before they put this in Wizard, this used to be way faster. Ruse will go down to one size for you. It will pick its best size out of like 12 or 13 available ones. There's several other options. But you could also just give it two sizes. Okay, you like big? What about small? What do these look like? Okay, it massively prefers overbetting to doing that given the option. Maybe there's a lot of merit to looking into overbetting this flop. If Solver prefers it that strongly, there's probably wisdom there. But me, I'm still happy to simplify. I'm not able to do that. I've got bigger fish to fry. I'm still working on my river spots. I don't need to learn a whole new flop strategy, which will then change the turn and change the river. I'm going to commit to my range bet 33 because you know what? I don't think it's so bad. My opponent faces my 1/3 bet, or let's say high frequency third bet. They go to GTO Wizard, 4.8% bet. They study what to do against 4.8% bet. This is the output they get. Very noisy. I don't have a lot of trust in the accuracy of this sim because of the way it's actually going to be building its range in whatever ratios. This will give you something useful. It will show you the sort of hands you might want to check raise, like ace-5 of hearts sometimes, some bottom pair. You can get some application of what your options are, but it's not going to conclusively tell you how to respond even in a balanced way. Get to something, but now you can go to Ruse and say, okay, balanced 1/3, what do I do? Prefers a larger size, and look, it's converging much more precisely with better frequencies on these sort of hands. And I'm on defense. I want to know what happens when my opponent range bets because I don't think they're splitting for a third. When I see a third, I'm pretty sure they're range betting. And so now Ruse will show me, it will expose me to the fact that I'm meant to raise 20% of the time, not 11. So if all my opponents are range betting on Queen Jack 4, and I'm raising 11% of the time, in fact, I'm raising 12%, I think I'm actually over bluffing. I'm exploiting them. I'm not even getting close to the exploitative frequency. And so solver libraries actually made people worse at exploits, worse at adjusting, worse at defining the spot. Because instead of having to define your opponent's range in a solver, take the position yourself and feed it the inputs, they've done that for us in an aggregate sense. And now we have to reverse engineer and try to brain solve on top of this to make use of it. Or run our own sims, which is boring as hell, and I can't be fucked. I want the speed of Wizard and the freedom of an actual amazing solver. And here we go, we pull up Ruse. Say I make a mistake, say I pick a size I don't like, or I set the sim up wrong, instantly solves it again. I can go back, easily patch my mistake. I don't have to set up the sim from scratch. Say I want to node lock something. We can click this. Where do we do this? I don't know all the buttons. There we go. We can actually go in and we can change the ranges however we like. Import ranges, export ranges, same sort of PO functionality. So node locking is also super, super fast. Like, again, I don't want to do the 90% raise. I want to do 50% raise. Okay, great. Oh, I get to raise even more. I can check the sort of hands that I might want to do that I might be missing. I'm not going to give you a detailed study guide here, just showing you the power. Then we raise, that's their defense. Oh, what if they never raise me on the flop? Does it change anything? I can tell you it's not going to change much, but that's a boost. What if my opponent overfolds? Again, not doing this precisely. What if they fold more? If my opponent overfolds to my half pot check raise, what happens to my check raise strategy? Oh, I check raise 100% if they fold that much. Obviously, we've probably got them folding some very strong hands here. We've got them folding jack X to this check raise. But let's imagine we're playing the nit of nits and they range bet and you know that they just fold like a lunatic, like they're only calling top pair. Imaginary world, not like most real opponents. But if that were true, we check raise everything. That's what solver likes if we node lock that specific league. That's pretty cool to me. Again, this isn't perfect, right? Because the max exploit against a human being wouldn't be to check raise everything, it would be to check raise all your bluffs. So you still have to figure out how to apply this intelligently as a human against human beings in real time. It doesn't answer everything, but it lets you stay way ahead of the curve and expose yourself to the truth of how the game really works. I'll show you something that is definitely giving too much away, but is one of the first things I teach in my coaching. I like to get deep into how the game actually works. What are we going to do against real opponents? In the real situations we're facing, how do we play? And ultimately, that means having a good baseline and knowing if people, say, are betting on boards where they shouldn't bet very much, or they aren't bluffing enough in spots that they should be. What are the actual responses? So a good one for that is like blind versus blind, basically a heads-up spot. A lot of people are c-betting too much. You get to a spot like this, it's pretty much a range check. So unless your opponent's just betting sets and stuff to make you spew into them, we can look at how we should respond if they just bet sets. Very often when people bet this board, they're making the mistake of actually betting, maybe even range betting. It happens. There are people who are in this range bet mindset, or you just see them autopilot bet everything. And so Wizard can't tell us anything because we hit a third. This is noise. This is bullshit. This is not a real sim. See, this is not a real sim. This is just random hands doing pretty much random stuff. If it's a 0% thing, Solver hasn't actually calculated that node. This isn't even correct in Solver land because the action never came up once it iterated down to this point. Whereas if you go into a solver like Ruse, and then you node lock that small blind is actually betting, we take away the check frequency, or we'll do it less extremely. We'll node lock just some betting. Hey, look, that's reasonable. A lot of these overpairs, these are even the preferred hands to be betting. And now we're looking at a real sim that we can actually learn something from. We still raise a hell of a lot because this is our board, baby. And I promise you, if they range bet, we're going to be doing it more. And it's not just the extreme boards, like all or nothing. Something like Jack 10-5, there's a lot of checking. So a lot of checking, 26%. If your opponent's range betting, obviously we should defend more, but how much more? It might not even be worth your time to run a full sim for that. That might not be your view. But you can very easily better align this with reality when you know your opponent is range betting or overextending. And you can coalesce it. Sorry, I don't know what the fuck I mean by coalesce. Line it up with how you actually play to actually get your options. Hell of a lot of raising. And if you wanted, you could raise and then node lock what happens when they fold too many hands. Just increase their fold frequency, not even by much. This is not the whole picture because you also should sort of abstractly node lock turn and river, and they matter more in a lot of ways. But at a starting point, right? Just to start, we should be raising 35% of the time now. And keep in mind, we're raising, and Solver knows exactly what our range is, and it now defends as well as it can, given that it's overfolding. So like this re-raise, for example, our opponent probably isn't re-raising. So we could even change that. We could make the re-raise thing almost down like this. I don't usually go through this many iterations because this isn't an efficient way to study, but you can prove all your logic very, very, very easily and actually start using the solver as a tool and a calculator. So now they're hardly raising. Now we raise 72% because they have to raise again to punish us for having these bluffs. So against a real human being with this node lock, you can argue for just raising everything in position. Like, again, that's not the strategy we're going to arrive at. We probably want to exploit within that. We probably want to use certain hands more and less of other hands. Less value, more bluffs. Generally a safe conclusion because the solver is then counter-adjusting on that street. This is available in a subscription model. I don't hear anyone talking about it. I don't hear anyone actually teaching you how to use it. to think better, but your brain should be shaped like something like Ruse, which is now available in GTO Wizard. Use referral code EQPoker. I'll put it in the link in the description of the video. I'm not a fan of GTO Wizard as a product, and I wish this company had stayed independent, but they sold, and this is where it is. I'm using this. This is what I teach my students. I used to think I would never let a new player, anyone before mid-stakes, near a solver. I was going to run a bunch of node lock sims and present the findings. Go, we know people do this. Here's what you should do. Here's the spots to do it. Here's the spots where it's close. Here's how to use a solver. Like, I would have had to do one entire month on how to set up your sims properly and how to interpret them because of how hard it was to just quickly iterate and quickly node lock this way. So I kind of had to go, here's the principle. Imagine that this applies in all these other spots. Now with Ruse, you can check the logic and see it and break solver and fix it multiple times a minute and actually just get into seeing how exploits really work under the hood. The shifting equilibrium that leads to actually playing poker. So now that you have all of this power, you have all of this access, this obviously isn't a magical answer machine, but it is a better magical answer machine than not having access to Ruse. What you want to use is these major data points, like these actual solver libraries for aggregate data. You want to understand the boards that you want to be betting more or betting less, because this is how the game works, right? Range versus range. Boards favor different people. Different hands in different buckets want to achieve different things against other sections of hands. Certain things happen to your opponent if they don't respond like solver, though. So this is baseline. Where people differ from baseline on the whole is where you start looking for imbalances and exploits. If they bet too much on a board, you should defend at least as much as solver, if not more. And then there's other exploits available from there. To then visualize exactly what you would do on a fundamental level against frequency exploits, against imbalanced ranges, you use Ruse to check that. And you can also use Ruse to see what your hand would do, what exactly pocket tens would do against your opponent's exact hand or your opponent's exact range. And you can do that by doing complicated node locking down the tree to actually have a brain solver, actually have a versatile calculator instead of being beholden to this statue that is like some random solver output that you're trying to memorize instead of understanding anything. Yeah, coaching is available. Essentially what I do is I have an extensive library that covers how to actually think about and approach poker. I've been in this game for well over a decade, coaching about 5 years now. I've gotten dozens of players to high stakes and beyond, and I teach you to actually think independently. Poker is not a single player game. We work as a team, it's a community, it's a collective. Basically what we do is we have a server to structure how to think about various spots, like strategically, how to actually approach those spots, how to think about them. And then we explore the exploits that are available against different player types, on different textures, in different situations. We back that up with data, both like mass data analysis, these general sort of trends, and then breaking that down in the micro nose to tail, so you actually understand what's going on in the big picture. Between mass data and then confirming our understanding and validating that with other high-level players, seeing how that breaks down in solver and making a plan to exploit it, just going through that process for months, for years, at a high level with players who actually love the game, you're fluent in a language. You're able to answer questions yourself, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel because a lot of this work has been done and people can just tell you what you're doing wrong and where to make the money. The process is laid out. Yeah, all that's behind a heavy paywall, but there you go. There's the gold. Get digging.